Hello and welcome to this week's 52 Weeks. This week we're starting into Chapter 8, which focuses in on economic development. The next couple weeks we'll be looking through economic development in a couple of segments, and the first we're going to go through this week as an introduction. When looking at economic development, it discusses typically the focus on a broad concept of growth. The comp plan, as noted before in previous 52 Weeks segments, that this was a capital investment plan which recognizes that there are interrelationships between the people, place, and economics around the city. Ideally, this is an ongoing thing that is within the city administration, the Harrisburg Planning Commission, the Planning Bureau, as well as City Council, and various neighborhood groups throughout the city, all looking at how Harrisburg grows and what the needs of the residents are, balancing the inside interests of residents with the outside forces that happen on any area for continued development. And one of the things we want to look at is how do you sustain this growth? In economic terms, growth has many implications, including population growth, increased commercial activity, infrastructure improvements, job creation, or increased direct investment in physical and intellectual assets. This is important because we want to know how do we build the capacity from within. These are all community capacity building things. It's not just the economics. We've talked about that a lot. I think that's the failure of Harrisburg earlier and many other cities focusing on just economics. Return on investment, focus on getting my money out of it. I see it transactionally. And what we've lost, though, are the focus of people in place. So the people are looking to continue education, bridging gaps where there are economic gaps in education and job growth, and how do we do continuing lifelong learning education within our communities, our faith-based groups, as well as our organizations and nonprofits, all pulling together to build skill sets from within the city so that we're not always reaching out. The outside approach looks at us as always needing something, so they're just going to come in and provide it. That's what's got to be starting to change. I don't see many people talking about that at the moment in the city. It's almost as a crisis mode of, well, we just need it, so we're going to just come in and fix it quickly. Instead of looking at a long-term approach of, okay, let's set up a plan and strategically looked at how do we grow to this, knowing how other cities have done it. So part of this segment is to look at the bigger picture, and we look at the economic development chapter. It recommends that the city focuses on three main priorities. The first priority is the maintenance industry. The second priority is strengthening the transportation hub. And the third priority is expand Harrisburg's private business sector. If we're looking at this in setting up a structure for the next decade and 2 decades, that's what we need to be looking at. So a bit of a review from what we've discussed before. Approximately Harrisburg has a residential population of 50,000 people, plus a daily influx of 38,000 employees for large and regionally based commuter population that come into the city to work. Of that, 5,400 state government employees down at the state capitol, and we also have 4,500 Pinnacle Health employees that work downtown. An important opportunity for an industrial city is looking at the building and open space assets that we have. This is the existing building structure. The public space is a green space around us, the green belt. The remaining space offers a culturally distinct foundation for the future city. This is the framework that we talk about. Economic development of commercial activity, workforce training, and urban redevelopment of its supporting infrastructure must move in a forward direction. We've got to try to plan out the next steps. We can't be reactive to this. The existing land use patterns delineate areas for two principal development typologies. So we look at the broader pieces of the city, the targeted areas of progressive new development of structurally vacant property that's around the city, and we also look at the restoration of adaptive reuse of large areas of intact residential fabric. So there's this mix of what's vacant and then what's already there intact, and how do they get knitted back together. So we step back out and understanding how our nation's changing within technology. For the past 50 years, the landscape of innovation has been dominated by places like Silicon Valley. This is embodied by suburban corridors of isolated corporate campuses, accessible by only car with little emphasis on quality of life, or the integration of work, housing, and recreation. So this mixing of things, work-life balance, that's been a dominated framework and playbook that's been out of the tech industry. And what's now changed in this decade that we're now closing is that there's a new complementary urban model that emerged, giving rise to what we and others are calling Innovation District. This comes from Brookings Institute, and I have a link on Brookings that you can read more of. The future Central Business District was an idea that we talked about early on in 52 Weeks. These districts are live, work, play destinations where leading-edge anchor institutions and companies cluster and connect with startups, business incubators, and accelerators while creating a strong sense of place, culture, and vitality. Careful planning is required to transform vacant industrial-era property to serve the post-industrial requirements of a regional center for 1.7 million people. So I know this is a bit of a stretch, but if we look at what all's happening in Techport and all the tech areas that are happening around in the ring, if we talk about the donut again, this is important. If we look at Harrisburg as being this hub and pulling together, looking at 1.7 million people that surround us. And we can begin to shift from the insignificance of Harrisburg of 50,000 people to actually serving a larger population of 1.7 million people, because that is the history of what Harrisburg was at one point. And this just isn't serving the population, but providing a high, diverse mix of culture, uniqueness of place and food, as well as experiences. This goal was possible only through high equity investments. So there are two areas we're looking at. The first is consolidation of regional public transportation in Harrisburg, and then the second was development of an innovation district and satellite hubs. This is looking at mixed income multifamily housing, and we have contemporary office space over mixed use. So these need to be the models within our city that give us some flexibility to start to generate innovation. The goal of participation of existing residents in this growth is a keystone in the comprehensive plan, which was realized by the low equity investments, distributed investment in existing building stock. So we have all this existing building stock in the housing restoration, housing maintenance, and makerspaces and innovation satellite districts. So we're able to start to hub up, in a sense, within our districts and our neighborhoods. And this is where our communities can be knitted together. And we're at this critical point as we enter 2020 to go into joining up the neighborhoods in a collective way that work together and actually learn from each other. So there's a professional learning community that we talked about before, or a neighborhood learning community that we can be sharing resources and be really in the know of what's happening so that our neighborhoods are more proactive. We're proactive at what we're seeking instead of reacting to all the things that happen to us. We go back to stop doing things to us, but start doing things with us. And that's what we want to start leading, the with us. And that's what's critical within our education system, within our business environments, our nonprofits. All of our entities need to be seeing this as a holistic approach and recognize what was done in the past has actually been detrimental. I think that's one thing in understanding the hurt that was done to people and place, that's property, money, and all the things that were done, and try to figure out how to repair that. That takes a healing process, and we're going to have to go through that in this next decade to transform to this next level. And I believe this is what we need to do for the 13,000 population that's under 18 years of age, this K-12 or pre-K to 12 population, because they're inheriting this next piece. And to change it in a way that gives them a place for birthing new ideas and growing is a very incredible thing to be involved in as a community and helping to grow within our city. City policy must promote reinvestment in the city's unique stock of historic building assets to leverage the aggregate value of city property as a whole. Policies must support appreciation of existing building stock as the foundation of the equity pool for future growth of the city. A more valuable city is a more economically flexible and powerful city. Another quote in the comp plan: National Geographic trends show the reversal of the suburban expansion that defined American cultural geography for the last 60 years. Harrisburg can benefit from the natural return of people and investment to the regional core. Reversing 60 years of population decline and neglect of the city's physical assets is a complex task requiring coordination of interrelated strategies and actions. So folks, this is a difficult task. This is long-term tasking. This is not something that's super quick for administrations to latch on and to rally political motive. This needs to be done from a grassroots effort, that we look at the interrelated strategies, holistic approach, and our actions together to move and achieve what we set out to do. So we can look at the goals in economic development. Goal 8.1, drive transformative economic growth in Harrisburg over the next 20 years through 3 related strategies. Number 1, harness latent value present in the city's undervalued building assets to fund reinvestment. Number 2, enhance regional connectivity, strengthening the city's long-standing role as Central PA's multimodal hub transportation. Number 3, increasingly concentrate economic and cultural activity in the region's core. And with that number 3, there's 4 additional pieces to that. Adding on to goal 8.1, target new mixed-use progressive commercial development in 3 master plan locations. Target emerging economic activity in existing community cores. Reposition former industrial land to sustainable forms of use. Strengthen the regional center for recreation and cultural activities. This takes a action plan. This just does not happen by itself. This is critical. And the question is, who is developing this? Because that is even a problem. So we got to continue to ask who is at the table, who's missing from the table, and look at it from a social equity point of view so that we can see everybody who's been pushed out in previous decades, in the 60 plus years of disinvestment, that there's a reinvestment in that, in the lives of people that have lived here the longest.